So glad you're here to hear more stories from Inside My Tent. These are the stories behind the scenes of my book, Visions, Voices, and Guiding Spirits, A Common Life with Supernatural Assistance. There is more to the story than is written on those pages. Today's video is about Jim's miracle. And this starts on the day that I was sitting in a cafe and a Mountie noticed that I had the bear spray on my belt. And he said to me, "Do you realize it's against the law and you can be fined $500 for carrying it?" And I said, "That's okay, because I think my life is worth more than $500, so I'll take the fine if I need to." He said, "You got a good point there." And we chatted and stuff. And then when he left, I headed south to a wonderful Buffalo Point campground on the beautiful Lake of the Woods. And that's where the book ends, or is on page 60. But from there, I met an incredible person who told me another story about supernatural assistance. And this is what I'd like to share with you today. Jim's miracle is about Chief Jim Thunder, who was chief of the Buffalo Point First Nations at that time, and I had known Jim from the time I was a little girl. So when he looked at the camping register, Jim noticed my name there. So he came over to my campsite and sat down on the picnic table, and we had a long visit. And then he told me this story. Jim and his family had worked endlessly, tirelessly to turn Buffalo Point into the beautiful resort community that it was on that day that I visited with him. It is still just a pristine location to visit. Let me get to Jim's miracle. So Jim's telling me about how a few years before, he just started to feel weak and sicker, and he got sicker and sicker, and he would go to the doctors and they would do multiple tests and they couldn't find anything that was wrong with him. But his health just kept fading and he wasn't able to keep up to his workload. Jim said they never did have a diagnosis, but one of the last tests he did was when they put the tube down your esophagus, the camera down to see what's going on. And he said from the day he came home from that test, his decline just was so much more rapid. He just got weaker and weaker until he got to a point where he was laying on the couch. Their family had accepted that he was dying. He said he could, if he even took water, he would vomit. It would come up immediately. He couldn't keep down water. And he was so weak, he was beyond talking or interacting at all. But it wasn't Jim's time. And as he lay there one day, so weak that day, he did have his miracle. And Jim describes it as, "There was a voice outside of me. And the voice said, 'Jim, you have to eat these 3 things. You have to eat sardines, pickled pig's feet, and canned corned beef.'" And when Jim told me that, I had that flash of that's how Noah must have felt when God told him to build the ark. But Jim did have the faith, and he believed that he was being guided by his spirits. So Jim said he didn't have the strength to call out for his wife Doris, but the next time she came close enough, he whispered to her, and he was imitating it. He was like, "Get me some. I want sardines. Sardines. Get me sardines." I don't know what Doris thought about that, but she was a wonderful wife, and she did give Jim his wish. So she went out and found Jim sardines and brought them back to him. Now Jim says when she brought him the sardine, he said, "I nibbled it so well." He said, "I nibbled a little bit and a little bit and a little bit." And he said, "I just managed to eat half of that sardine." And he said, "Of course, I expected it to come right up because the water would." And he said, "You know what? that sardine stayed down into my stomach. And he said after a few hours, I got the other half of that sardine down. And he said slowly, over the days, I ate sardines. And then the next thing, Doris brought me the pickled pig's feet. And then I ate the sardines and pickled pig's feet. And then finally, I got to incorporate the corned beef. And he said my energy started to come back. It was slow. It was a slow get back to health. Jim's miracle, of course, is so impactful for me for 3 reasons. The first, of course, that he describes the guiding voice from being outside of himself, and I feel that way when I hear my voices. People have said, oh, it's just your thoughts, it's in your head. But when you hear a voice that is not familiar and it's giving you some guidance, you don't think it's just another thought, because Jim certainly did not think on his deathbed that those were the 3 things he should be eating. The second amazing thing is this would not have come to mind for me as a superfood or a highly nutritious diet that could make a difference. The third thing is that I was struck by the fact that these are the foods that generations past ate. Interesting thing is, of course, Jim and his family would have been eating a lot of wild meat, whether it was fish or venison. Growing up, we all did. We didn't have supermarkets and freezers, so we ate what we could. The things that Jim ate were the same things that were in my grandmother's cupboard for when the fresh meat wasn't available. So these things Jim would have eaten in his youth or in his younger days. We always try to explain things, and for me, I was thinking, well, maybe these things had nutrients in them that Jim was missing in his regular diet. But then I remember that we can't always explain things. We do not have all of the answers. So whenever we can get extra help from our spirit guides, we could listen to them. In closing, I'll just say, be open to your own guiding spirits. Whether it's the Holy Spirit, or if you believe in ancestral spirits or animal spirits, God's spirit, the Spirit of God, your higher self. Listen to the voices beyond your own and keep well. And when you do find me, please subscribe or follow so that you don't miss our next story. Thanks for watching.